Hello, everybody. This is Brian O'Haron, and it's May 15th. I'm recording this. Might play it, repeat it once or twice, get it up on the Charter website. This is Getting Things Done, and this is on Saturday nights at 5:30 to 6:30. Spread the word around if anybody wants to watch it on the weekend. This program will be on Saturday, and that's tonight, the night you're watching it. I want to spend a lot of time tonight, the whole program, talking about mill rate and tax increases, because there's a lot of confusion in town. Some of it because other people want it to be confusing. We don't want it to be confusing. As you know, I'm unaffiliated. I'm a member of no political party. But I am fiscal conservative. I like to see money earned before it's spent, and I like to see responsible budgets. And I wrote all those green and red papers trying to help the town to get in that position over the last 7, 8 years. And, you know, we're inching forward like a snail, but maybe we're making some progress or not. But the town itself is not making progress. They're going backwards rapidly, and that's what we've been talking about all these weeks. That's what the other programs talk about. And I've mentioned to you before the other programs. I'll do it again. I need to put on my goggles here, but Ken and Glenn, fiscal conservatives in the minority on the Board of Selectmen and Finance Board, they're on here, Charter Channel 13, with Crossing the Divide. And then it's put up onto the Charter website, usually the following Monday, and it's up available there for about 8 weeks. It does move around on the website. It starts on page 1 or 2, and then it moves up to 3 and 4, 5 and 6. Sometimes it gets up as far as 20 or 21 or 2. So just page forward on the website if you can't find it on the first or second page. And it's on Charter. They do a pre-recording usually because they're businessmen and they work, and they try to do it on Saturday morning. They're on Tuesdays from 8 to 8:30 p.m. on Channel 13 here. And they're on Thursdays from 5:30 to 6 p.m., same show repeated usually. Maybe once in a while they'll do something different if there's an emergency or something, but not often. The next program, and I'm going to play you a clip, not right this minute, but I'm going to play you a clip from Efficient, Effective, Affordable, and Accountable to You, which is hosted by James Roberts, who's been going on for a few years there. He's on weekly, sometimes repeats for a while if he's on vacation or if there's no new news in town. He'll just keep repeating the program until he gets back and does a new one. But certainly if there's new news, he does a fresh program each week. And they're on Wednesdays from 6:30 to 7 p.m. and they're on Saturday from 3 to 3:30 p.m. And I'm on for the foreseeable future, at least the next month or so. I'm on at 6 p.m. on Tuesdays with Planning for Success, which is where I try to get into more techniques for planning and examples and approaches that might help make people successful when they plan. A lot of people aren't good at planning. You know, a lot of them are seat of the pants type people, like our liberal selectmen and our liberal finance board members. They're more seat of the pants. Same with the Board of Education, seat of the pants. They don't look down the road very far to see if there's any cows on the track. If they were train conductors, there'd be a lot of dead cows and a lot of dead people, most likely, along the way. But my program, Planning for Success, is on at 6 p.m. on Tuesday night for 1 hour. And my Getting Things Done program, this one you're watching now, is on at 5:30 to 6:30 on Saturdays. And I try to do new programs when I can. Sometimes I have to repeat one. Now, I'll say in advance here, that tonight we're experimenting a little with, and we have been for the last few weeks, with finding ways to produce the program a little bit faster and to have it a little more professional in some respects. We are making some mistakes as we go along, so please bear with us on that. We do try to fix them if they're really bad mistakes. If they're not, we just let them go by. We're all amateurs here, basically, except the people who work at Charter. And we've never been to any acting school or speaking school or any of that kind of thing. So we try to wing it, get through here, learn ourselves along the way. I've learned a lot over the last 6 years working down here, and just about how to prepare and present and all that kind of thing. And I feel I've been a little more effective because of that. I get a lot of compliments, and I get some by people who tell me I'm the dumbest guy they ever saw in their life, and they can't wait till I move out of town. But that's all part of being a leader, and part of being an activist, and part of being proactive is that not everybody's going to like you. And there are people that will intimidate you, your family, your grandkids, whatever they can, to try to drive you out of town or drive you out of the game. But I remember when Michael Jordan was playing basketball, and I've mentioned it on this program before, he'd do anything he could to distract his opponents. He'd pull on their pants, he'd pull on their shirt, he'd try to hold them back. He would do anything he could to get them to not concentrate on their basketball playing so that his team could win the game. And he was well known for that. He was a great defensive guy and a great offensive guy, but you know, he would do whatever he could. He'd talk to the people, tell them they couldn't make a basket if they tried, all that kind of thing. Well, I get all that too, and so do all the other people from any party or a group. People will try to get you out of the game one way or another and make it more advantageous for their own team. So you got that going on now. Looks like the Naders are involved with the liberal Democrats, and who they never used to get along with before, from what I gather in history. You got a lot of taxpayer association switches around from group to group wherever they think is best for the taxpayers. We got the unaffiliated switching around from group to group wherever they think it's best. And you got the Republicans, either liberal or conservative, switching around, allying with different groups. And then, of course, there's the famous independent party of 50, and they sometimes work across the board as well. So tonight, what's been happening here is people have been spreading a lot of confusion about the mill rate and the tax increase. And especially with me, they say, Brian, you always told us there was going to be a 21% tax increase. And I say, no, you misread the sign, or you misread the information, or maybe I made a slip of the tongue one time. But we're always said that it was going to be a mill rate increase of 21%, mill rate increase. And we always said that some people will be affected more by it and some less, depending on the valuation of their property when we went through the revaluation process in 2012 with Vision Appraisals. So we've always had the same word. We've always put it forward that there would be a 21%. Now you're going to see a slide which shows you what the mill rate increase is now going into this with this proposed budget from the Finance Board and the Selectmen. It's actually 22.69%. So we were pretty much on the ball there. Now a lot of things happened along the way, which I'm going to explain on this program tonight. It won't be perfect, it won't be everything, because that would take me a week on TV to do that. So I got this proposed mill rate increase. There's a lot of confusion about it, but a tax increase is a tax increase on your property and on your personal property, or on your whatever you have, your business. That's a tax increase. The mill rate increase is calculated by how much money we need to make the revenue or the business budget for the next year. And they have to take a lot of things into consideration before they, you know what the mill rate is. There's all kinds of things that have to, how much you're going to get from the state, how much you're going to get here, how much you're not going to get there. And once, that's usually not known until like about the day before the annual town budget meeting, when all that will come together. And I learned a lot of that from Henry Centrella when he was the financial director. He brought me through the mill rate process that I didn't even understand myself, and he would never give me a mill rate till we were ready to go to the annual town budget meeting. Now, and then he would calculate the mill rate, having all the information that he needed to do so, hopefully, and then he would say that's what the mill rate's going to be. And I can remember some of the liberal Democrats pushing him a month in advance to get a mill rate. What's the mill rate going to be? What's the mill rate going to be? But he would not give it to anybody, I can tell you. He was stubborn on that because he knew, just like I know, that it changes all the time. And you have to be very careful when you deal with the mill rate. So I've had people in the town hall, mostly the liberal Democrats. I've had people in town. I had somebody come by my house on Mother's Day and say, you said it was going to go up, taxes were going to go up 21%. And I say, no, we never said that at all. We always said the mill rate was going to go up. And I was carefully warned about that by John Gauger, who is very, very, very informed about this, having been the mayor and a select person and head of the Taxpayer Association and all that. So tonight I'm going to try to go through a bit of that with you. And right now, I'm going to play a clip from John Gauger and John Roberts' program. It lasts about 4 minutes, maybe 4 minutes and 40 seconds, where they tried to explain up front why the reval didn't come out quite as we expected in detail, but did come out pretty much as we expected with the mill rate increase. When you see this clip, you're going to understand. I'll play it again at the end of the program, because during the program I'm going to explain some of the why it is that way. Not everything, but give you a rough idea, and you can follow up on yourself later. Talk to anybody who knows something about it. Now, not many people understand mill rate. Not many people understand why the tax increase is the way it is, or whether it has to be that way. So let me just say one more thing before we play the clip, and that is that when property values go up in town, you will get the mill rate will be lowered, or should be lowered, or can be lowered. There's never any golden rule, and that's because more people are helping you pay the taxes. That's like bringing 3 uncles into your house to help them pay for the food and the rent and taxes and everything else. So it's cheaper, a little cheaper for each person than it would be if you and your wife or you and your husband paid the taxes. So you bring in boarders. That's what we used to do 50 years ago. Anything we could to get the cost down. That's where the boarding house reach got invented. And by the way, the boarding house reach was not invented for the 5 liberal Democrats that are on the finance board and selectmen. That wasn't, but they use the boarding house reach all the time, trying to take things off other people's plates. But we don't want them to boarding house reach into our homes, into our businesses, and we don't want that to happen at all. What we want to do is try to balance things and everybody pay their share and everybody get the benefits from that. So with that, let's play the clip and then we'll talk more about it.
You're not going to close the deficit. You cannot go out there and pay the deficit off, which is going to be 5 to 7 mills, without restructuring the services and bringing costs down. I mean, we understand that there is going to be some increase because you can't do it all one way or all the other. I mean, it's not all we're going to levy the tax and you're going to pay it, because you'll put the old town under.
Right.
I mean, there is just no more left in the real estate value there to do it. And people are questioning me on well, your reval analysis was wrong. It was dead right, because many of the houses that surround me are foreclosed properties, are abandoned properties, properties that went for $40,000, but they weren't included in the reval because of the state language saying that it had to be an arm's length transaction.
And let's just explore that for a minute. The reason that the state doesn't or hasn't historically included those things is they have been seen to be exceptional. In the past, if there was a foreclosure on your street, it was an unusual occurrence. Yeah. It was a family that had gone through a tough time, perhaps illness, perhaps the end of a marriage, perhaps the loss of a job. It was not a daily occurrence. In Winsted, in the last 18 months, foreclosures have become a daily occurrence. Downtown, foreclosures are the market. You can't look at any given street downtown and say, here's a willing buyer and seller, and here is a foreclosure. They're all driven by the foreclosure prices at this point. And so the notion that we are going to, quote unquote, take part of the market, but not all of the market, doesn't make sense.
I'll give you a for instance, okay? In my neighborhood, and I'll just say my little neighborhood of Bank Street, Hill Street, Mountain, in Oak for the time being, but I look at more than that. In that area, there were 2 newer houses on Mountain Avenue, both on half-acre plus plots. One sold for $110,000, one sold for $101,000. Both of them, and those were at arm's length transactions. There were no houses that sold for more than $110,000. When you go and you look at my appraisal, my appraisal is way above that. When you look at the houses on my street, I mean, the house across the street was foreclosed for $40,000. They put an appraised price on that very high. But the sales price doesn't match it because it wasn't an arm's length transaction. So you have me now hemmed in by a bunch of foreclosed properties that are the market, and you're saying that you know, in this, you know, the average price went down, what, 16, 18%?
Right.
And, you know, you're going to come out of this winding up paying more. I mean, that's the 23%
Right.
increase.
Yeah, I mean, it's right there. And the idea that anyone thinks that that is a reasonable outcome, whether it be at the state level, the town level, or at the individual level of you or I, is absurd. Everyone understands that the market is the market. You can't just say, we're going to exclude all sales from people called Smith to people called James. That's absurd. But that's exactly what actually happened. We excluded all sales that were
Yeah.
foreclosures.
Yeah.
Just an arbitrary distinction that was drawn that skewed the numbers. But anyway, we digress. No one stood up to support the budget last night. It was noticeable. We had a significant audience. I would say that the audience was probably generally favorably disposed towards the budget. But interestingly enough, no one stood up to actually support it.
Yeah. And there's good reason, because if you support it.
All right, that was the clip. I hope you could understand it, but the kind of bottom line is that there are statutes in the state and OPM, and people have guidelines, and there's all kinds of reasons why how they can evaluate things and leave things out, and we'll talk a bit about that tonight, give you a few examples of that so you understand. Now, it is very complex. There's no way you can judge in advance exactly what people are going to be doing and how the numbers are going to work out and what decisions the town and the appraisers will take and how they will interpret the rules from the state. So that all is down in the detail, but the bottom line is still kind of the same. So the next slide will show you what the budget request is for the June 1st budget referendum. Annual town budget referendum is going to be held at Pearson School between 8 in the morning and 8 at night. For anybody who's going to be in town on that day, anybody else can, one way or another, vote for this budget, for or against this increase. By using absentee ballot, and if you're in town during the rest of the month and you're not going to be here on the 1st, you can go down to town hall. You can do it right there in the back room. Take you maybe 15-20 minutes. Get in there, get an application, fill it out, get the ballot, go in the back room and do your vote. Put it in an envelope that nobody else can open except for the ballot openers that are elected by the public. One, I guess, is one Democrat and one Republican. I'm not sure, but. That are the people that do that kind of thing, and they will make sure that it's all held as confidential and as private as they can. Now, on this slide, we got a little wrong number there. That it's part of this process that we're trying to use a different way to do these slides, and we dropped the ball on this one. But it's basically 8.6% or so is what the actual budget request is over last year. So we have a larger budget by 8.6%, and we have to meet that budget. We have to meet those expenditures, and in order to do that, because the values of the property went down by an average of 18% or so, we have to raise the mill rate to get the same amount of money that we got that we had in this year's fiscal budget. So 18.6% is an increase. It doesn't say zero there, and it doesn't say minus. It says plus 8.6%. That's how much more. Now, if you talk to the town manager or watches any of his programs on TV or read any of his articles in the paper, they have all kinds of minutia to try to justify that. But we fiscal conservatives, as I said on other programs, we look at the bottom line. We want to see what the bottom line on the budget request, no matter how they cobbled it together, is a plus 8.6% more money that they're going to need for one reason or another in the next fiscal year. So understand that, because that's very important. It's only going to be, if that's voted on the 1st, if it's voted in, that's what it'll be, that much more. If it's voted down, they'll have to go back and redo another budget, and that number may change. Most likely it will go down one way or another, unless there's a catastrophe, which there might be along the way, and then maybe it'll go up for one reason or another if if we're forced to do so because of the bad management we have right now in the Finance Board, in the Board of Education, and with the selectmen. They are, in the end, they're responsible for everything. They have a lot of people helping them and working with them, finance directors, they have a town manager, they have superintendents, but in the end, they carry the can here on all this kind of stuff. So the next slide is going to be, I just want to explain to you, I wrote a red paper number 1. We've had it on another program, Planning for Success. I think I went last week through the red paper number 1 a little bit. Can't read the whole thing because it takes too much time. But I wrote a red paper on June 18th of 2012 when we first started to see that we thought the revaluation would affect all of the property owners in town, and also all the business owners, all the personal property tax people, owners of personal property, and it was going to affect the actual future budgets of the town. It was going to affect the town and the schools and everybody, all the service organizations and everything else, because we saw that values were going down on all of the properties throughout our town. And Winchester, around the lakes, and in the center part of the town. So what I did was, in that paper, and you got the slide up now, I'll just read it to you and talk a bit about it, but in early 2012, the revaluations indications are correct. Oh, I think we got, I'm not on the right one myself. I think you're a little ahead of me out there with these slides. The first one in the red paper, I said that there were going to be, he's all right with the slide, I think. Okay, I said that if early 2012 revaluation indications are correct, I wrote this in the red paper, new appraised values in the downtown will probably average 45% down, 45% less. I also said that at Highland Lake, we might average 6% down. Values will be down on Highland Lake, which will affect, of course, the grand list, because that'll be less money when values go down. You get less money on the grand list unless you raise the mill rate up or cut the expenses. A lot of people just say, like the liberal Democrats that are in majority now, oh, we'll just raise the mill rate up to get the same amount of money in we had when the property was worth much more. Well, the fiscal conservatives say, no, the property is worth much less now, so you're going to have to decrease the mill rate, and you're going to have to, you're going to have to cut some expenses, or you're going to have to bring in more revenue from some other, people, but not to just sink it with the taxpayers. Now, so the downtown average, we expected to go down about 45%. Highland Lake, about 6%. And in the town of Winchester out there, the Winchester part of the town, 26%. Not the whole town, but the Winchester section of the town. We expected that to go down about 26%, and I put that in my red paper. Now, that red paper to normal people, normal business people, they would say, thank you very much for giving us that heads up. Our existing majority, they always think this is negative information. They don't like to see this kind of stuff. So they don't look at it the same way. But business people would say, thank you. Now let's see what we can do to manage around it, or let's see what we can do once this information comes out to make it easy for everybody, run the town efficiently, get the taxpayers to pay a reasonable amount of money, that kind of thing. So the average we had there on these in the red paper, and it's a rough average because in order to do a proper average, you have to kind of take all the numbers, how many people are at the lake, how many people are in Winchester, how many people are in downtown, blah, blah, blah. But this is just a rough idea, to give people a rough idea of what could happen here. And notice, it's not a plus 26%, not a plus 26% at all. It's a minus 26%. When you ever see those little parentheses around a number, in math that means minus. So you got a minus 45% downtown average. That's all this, down in this local area where people could walk to work, walk to schools, walk to the hospital, walk to the stores, walk to everywhere, or very close to it, hop, skip, and a jump type thing. Highland Lake, 6%, decrease is what we kind of expected, and Winchester, 26%, because there were fiscal conservatives that were very, very mathematically inclined and business oriented that were keeping an eye on what over the last few years, what all the properties in all these areas were selling for. And they made these numbers, they took these numbers and they said, well, look, if values are selling for those kind of prices, this is probably what we can expect from the revaluation, right? Now, what happened, of course, was that the revaluation came through and they went, and I'm going to talk a bit later about what some of the conditions were. For example, they don't like to include in their numbers things that aren't sold for fair value. And that fair value thing is as long as a piece of string. It could be anything, and I'll give you some examples later. But for example, if you were foreclosed on, that might not be considered fair value. If you sold it to your brother, it might not be considered fair value. If you sold it to a business, that might not be considered fair value. There's a whole list of things, pages long, of all the things that they can consider. And if you sold it with the furniture, then the furniture would not be included in the fair value. If you sold it with a boat or with a truck or a car, they wouldn't be included in the fair value for that house. So it can get very complex. And what I want to point out to you is people, no matter how sharp they are, I mean, even if they were as sharp as Marianne Welcome, they would not be able to get in there and figure all this out in advance, because a whole vision appraisal company comes in and they have to go through the whole process, which takes a year or so, and then they come up with the numbers after making decisions on all the properties that they are evaluating, and then making some assumptions and making some going through the rules and coming up with that. So this was done with the best efforts of volunteers in town who are very numerate and spend a lot of their personal time keeping an eye on what the houses were selling for, and how many were being foreclosed on, how many were, but they didn't apply all the rules, of course, that the state would apply. Now, while we're here on this page, I want to explain to you that when, as I started to say earlier in the program, if more people come to town and you have 3 uncles living with you, that means it's a little cheaper for everybody to live in the same house. They all chip in to help pay the bills. If you have a boarding house, it's even cheaper then for every individual. But now, on the other hand, people will try to make you believe, and that's happening right now all over town, because the liberal Democrats and the town manager and everybody else, they want you to believe that whenever valuations go down, we should raise the mill rate to bring in as much money as we had before. Now, that's a nice idea. But in our particular town, and everywhere else, you don't have to raise the mill rate. You can go in and cut expenses. You can manage the expenses. Or you can bring in more revenue one way or another into town to help get 3 more uncles to help you pay for these expenses in the town. And of course, 3 more uncles wouldn't be enough, but you could get many more $1 million houses. You could get with no children in them, which was very profitable for the town. You could get businesses to come in and pay very profitable tax. You can get developments to come in, and one time we had age-restricted ones. You had to be 55 and older, and they wouldn't have any children, and that would bring profitable tax into town, and that's where we've fallen down. We haven't been over 10 years bringing any more profitable revenue into town. It hasn't been growing. It's kind of stuck. So what the fiscal conservatives are trying to tell you now is, look, we're in deep trouble financially. We all know that. That's not what I'm going to try to really emphasize on this program. That'll be on all the other programs and my own other programs. So basically, we're in deep trouble now financially. The fund balance is zero. We owe money to vendors all over the place that we haven't paid in many, many, many months. We owe the school vendors money. It's like $1.6 million, probably more than that even. We don't really have all the numbers. We don't have all the people we owe in the town. That isn't public information yet. We're in deep trouble. We haven't finished a couple audits. That one of them's a year and a half late to the state. The other one is going to be overdue before you know it. And we're being investigated by the state police for wrongdoing, which may turn out to be nothing at all. We're counting on insurance money to come in that may or may not show up. We had a budget this year that overestimated the revenue it was going to get in by about $1 million, and it underestimated the expenses it was going to have, and just terrible situation we're in. So it's not an automatic necessity to raise the mill rate to pay for a bad budget this year to make up for that. That's not, and for bad management over 10 years. You can't go to the taxpayers, that's you people watching on TV, no matter which party you're in or which affiliation you are, and say, oh, we've been mismanaging for 10 years and we're $3.2 million deficit. We want to raise the mill rate now to help pay for all that over 10 years. And basically what I want to say here is we do not have a plan that's viable for getting out of this mess we're in right now. This next budget that's going to be voted on June 1 is a bad budget. It's not going to help us get out of this pickle for ever, maybe. And even if it does, it'll take 8 to 10 years to do it. We're going to have real chaos in town in the meantime because everybody's going to demand raises and the cost of living increases and insurance rate increases. That's still going to be going on while we're in trouble and while we can't even pay the bills we got right now. So I'm going to talk a bit about more of that on my Planning for Success program on Tuesday night. Tune into that if you want to hear it, or wait till it gets on the internet and take a look at it. So these are what we said in the red paper, and it was going to be a 21% mill rate increase. And I was always quite careful to say possible numbers, and I say, and even on this paper, indications are correct if the indications are correct. So we always got to provide some kind of a maybe and that kind of thing. So possible is a key word I like to use all the time because you never know for sure. You never know. It's very complex. This is all very complex. And you got to use those kind of words. Now, when they get on and tell you about it, you said it was going to be a 21% tax increase, which, of course, we didn't say. So it turns out that we're pretty well right, and we're going to be pretty well right in most of the fiscal conservatives and what they're estimating for next year. Even if you get the budget passed, you're probably going to crash here be in the first half of next fiscal year, even if you get the increase that they want, because they have a bad budget for next year as well, just like they had for this year. So they have not fixed all that. That'll probably be pointed out when the audits are done, and it'll be made very clear by the auditors that we still got the financial pickle we're in. We might have improved a little here or there, but basically we haven't made it. So now I'm going to show you what the preliminary results were that were published. I got this from the town hall. They might be a little different now. They sent me something that was done that I thought I would use. So I want to just say again, there have been many changes over the time. We still got changes going on when somebody adds to the grand list or subtracts from it. But basically, here's how it came out when Vision Appraisal did it. Highland Lake came out to be on no waterfront. That's the other side of the street from the lake. That means you don't have any waterfront on the lake. That averaged down negative 22.61%. Now remember, in our last slide we had minus 6%. So that came out a hell of a lot lower than what we thought it was going to come out, and what the early indications were that were in the red paper. And that's because they used the state statutes, and they came up with all kinds of reasons why certain properties weren't sold at fair value, and they adjusted the number then to a minus 22.6% for Highland Lake no waterfront properties. Now, Highland Lake waterfront went down less. It went down 14.52%, and they divided it up here into waterfront and no waterfront. Now, in our estimate, we didn't divide it into. We just had a 20% across the board a 6% across the board for Highland Lake decrease. Notice it wasn't an increase; it was a 6% decrease in that red paper. And then Winchester came out to be 20.92% decrease. And Winstead, instead of the 46% we had in there or so, it came out to be 18.26%. And that's what John and And James, we're trying to explain to you on the clip. You'll see it again at the end of the program. And what happened there is they're pretty sure that, maybe for good reason, it's probably all legal. I don't know anything about that. But when we were studying the Winstead sales for the last couple of years, it looked very much like they were going to be down, all things being equal, about 46% or so on average. And but what happened there was when they started applying all the rules, just like they did at the lake and in Winchester and everywhere else, they drove the number in a different direction. So the people downtown are only down on average 18.26% instead of 46% or so. And that's because they eliminated a lot of the properties that they did not consider to be sold at fair value. And they might have been sold again to your one of your relatives. They might have been foreclosed on. There might be a short sale. A short sale is when the bank can't get the money from the person who owns the property and doesn't want to go into foreclosure. Then they'll just have a short sale. They'll go out and find a buyer to buy it, and they'll give them certain benefits to be able to do that, so they don't have to go through the foreclosure process. I'm not an expert in real estate and those kind of things, but I'm just telling you now why these numbers were different. But the bottom line was still the same. So here, and again, this average is a little different for you, because if we really wanted the proper average, we'd have to count the number of no waterfront houses. We'd have to count the number of waterfront houses on the lake. We'd have to count the number of all the properties in Winchester, and the same in Winstead. Then we get those numbers, we could do a more accurate thing. But anyway, when they did the overall calculation, Vision Appraisal and the town and whoever else gets involved in it, they came up with an average decrease. But before we get to that, I want to show you, if we flip over to the next slide, we have, I want to just add in here, these were kind of excluded from what we're talking about now, but the commercial went down 11.2% in value, and the industrial 13.02% in value. So everything's going down, nothing's going up. And that's something you got, but when I say nothing's going up, of course something's going up. The mill rate going up. They want to raise the mill rate 22 point whatever it was I said percent there, 22.5%. Instead of saying getting the efficiencies out of the schools in the school system and in the school in the town put together, as we talked about on previous programs, and trying to look into all the money we're spending on medical insurance across town schools and any place we can. Now they're piddling around with that. They got their finger in the dike. They're trying little things, but we are in the process, as I'll talk about on my next program, Planning for Success, on Tuesday night at 6 o'clock. We're going to talk about the real necessary changes that are needed, not just putting your finger in the dike. So I wanted to show you this commercial and industrial. Now the average actually turned out to be minus 18% across everything in town. That's how much, on average, Vision Appraisal and whoever else figures out these numbers, after they made all their decisions on what was fair value and what wasn't fair value, blah, 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 they came out with the number of roughly about 18%. Now that varies a little. Sometimes they'll tell you it's 16.9%, but that means, that when they do the first number, 16.9% is without the autos and things like that. So the basic number that's being tossed around everywhere you go is about 18%. We went down on average in value. So that's what I wanted to say. Now on the next slide, I want to talk about what we need to do. I mean, everything else is reducing. Everything's reducing. By the way, it isn't just the revaluation that's reducing everything. We're also had bad management over the last 10 years, especially over the last four or five, and this bad management has gotten us deep into the hole in a couple areas. One area is It's gotten us into the hole of, they keep saying different numbers, and the last one was 2.8 million, then down to 2.4 million a week or so later. Before that, it was 3.2 million deficit for the end of June. When we finish this fiscal year at the end of June, we'll probably be somewhere between 2.8 million and 4 million, have a deficit for that. We have a real cash flow problem. We can't pay our vendors. We haven't been paying our vendors. A lot of vendors aren't getting paid, especially the school. The school superintendent wrote a letter to the town manager and said, hey, we got about $1.6 million here in vendor money that hasn't been paid. That's overdue. Could be more than that, could be less than that. Some people tell me that he didn't have all the numbers included in that note. Town manager wrote back, hey, we don't understand why you're saying this. It looks like you got bad information. Now I'm paraphrasing what was in the email, but you know, it's very, very, very confused. Now, guess what? We have zero money, zero. Well, they say it's about 200,000 now unofficially, but basically, and that's probably encumbered, but we don't have any money in the fund balance basically. We got such a low fund balance that we can't borrow any money right now. Now, that doesn't mean it won't change. Maybe a rich uncle will come along and leave us 10 million, then we might put it in the fund balance and we might be better off. But one of the mills that they want in this new budget is they say, to put money in the fund balance. But we who know how to handle money say, hey, that's going to have to go out the door as soon as possible and practical to pay off these bills that especially if somebody sues us or if we get in a pickle. Because we've been told recently, last week, that we're probably not going to get any more money from the state if we get in trouble. And that the state even says, hey, look, if you get in trouble, you're going to probably have to reduce and restructure in your town. We have no money to give you to make up for that. The taxpayers who don't want to pay the money, there must be some good reason for it. Now, this didn't get reported in the papers, but the observers that went down there heard it, and they all heard it the same way. And that let's get the other problem is we don't have audits finished. One of them's a year and a half late or so, maybe a year and a quarter. And you can't do that in business. You got to have be on the ball, you know. You got to find out why the audit isn't being done, and you got to go fix it. Now, we are in the process of doing that, but it's way too late. I mean, we've been running late on audits for, well, ever since I can remember. And we've had a lot of problems, and we've had a lot of the auditors telling us, here's what you need to do to fix the problem. And then we got, we who know more than them say, oh, no, we don't need to do that. We won't do it. Well, that's all caught up with us now. So this slide that I've got up says we have a need to now. This budget here is an increase of up the 22.43 or whatever it was mills. This is an increase. But what we need to do is reduce our spending. That's what we need to do right now. We need to reduce the spending, and then we need to restructure in order to do that as well. And we need to then reinvest in the things that will get us more revenue in town. That'll grow our town. We got to be able to go out and give incentives to people to come here and work with us. We got to be able to invest in finding those people. There's a lot of things that have to go on here. We have to invest in the infrastructure and other things to be able to attract the people there. We got to invest in the schools and all that kind of stuff. So we got to find out where we're not spending the money practically. And I always kind of use this example: 1.5 superintendents. Raise your hand if you come from another city somewhere in America that has 1.5 superintendents or more than one superintendent, for a much bigger population and many more students in the class. So things are going down here. We're losing students over the years, and that's happening to all kinds of towns around us. They're all trying to combine. They're all trying to work together to have one school for many towns, like we used to do in the old days when Gilbert took in all the towns around us, and that went to pot a little bit over time, and a lot of them went off and formed their own school for one reason or another, Region 7, and went to other places. And we still, right now, send a lot of people out with vouchers, so to speak, to Region 7, to the Oliver Wolcott, and other schools like that. Some go to some art school over in Hartford. I don't know much about that, but that's what we need to do. We need to turn this budget down because it's a bad budget. And then we got to tell these inefficient finance board and the inefficient selectmen, especially the majority, we got to tell them, mainly the majority, we got to tell them that come back with a budget that breaks us even. And they're going to throw their hands up. Most of them won't run for office again if they have to do that, which will be a good thing, because then we can get somebody in there to try to make this thing happen. So in my next Planning for Success program on Tuesday, I'm going to show you one way to do that. So they need to reduce, restructure, reinvest. We need to do it now. We need to vote the budget down, and we need to go back to the drawing board, come up with a good budget now. We've had enough bad budgets. Come up with a good budget that gets us on an even playing field so that we can start to go forward in the future. And that's very important. It's very important for you. You're the owners of the town. You're the taxpayers. You can get anybody you want to come in and coach. You can get Ralph Nader. You can get the Shafik Nader Trust. You can get anybody you want in here. But if you don't reduce, restructure, and reinvest, and do it now, not have a 10-year plan to get even, where everything can go wrong in the meantime, you don't want that, especially when people are leaving town. The population is changing, the number of students is decreasing. So we gotta, we can't say, well, we want a new school and that's the first priority. I mean, that's absolutely ridiculous. What you need to do is get profitable first, break even at least, and then begin to think, now that we got all the inefficiencies out of the school system, out of the town versus the school and other organizations, out of the medical inefficiency out of the medical insurance. That doesn't mean reduce it. That means go try to find a way to get the same amount or more cheaper, and by combining with other towns or anything like that, that's what you kind of got to do. So the next slide, you're going to see you got to plan the 2013-14 budget immediately. You got to turn it down, replan it, do it immediately, because that's important. That makes people face the fact. Hey, buddy, that leg you got there might have to be sawed off one day if you don't do this, this, and this kind of exercising, and take this and this kind of medicine, and do that, that, and that. And then once somebody realizes that, then they will make a decision. They'll get on the right track, and they'll at least, no guarantee they're going to win, but they'll try their best. The next one is we need to create a 5-year plan. That's the next slide. Create a 5-year plan, like I told them in my red paper. I can't even remember the number of it. But create a 5-year plan, managed by objectives. Management by objectives. You're talking Harvard Business School stuff here. This ain't New Britain Teachers College stuff. This is Harvard, and all the best business schools in the country will tell you this. Maybe even New Britain Teachers College will tell you this. But managed by objectives, MBO. Now I know the name of New Britain Teachers College has changed over the years and their curriculum and all that. But I think we still get the people here running the town that come from that New Britain Teachers College part from 60, 70 years ago. But we need to manage by objectives, manage by exception, MBE it's called, and we have to have quarterly reviews where we make decisions to stay on budget and reduce, restructure, and reinvest if we have to, or spend the extra money that we think we're going to get in during that year because we've improved so much. That's what quarterly reviews are all about, facing the problems every 3 years, not every year end or anything like that. 3 budget referendums have failed. You know that. There's a zero budget increase proposed now with a question mark because we don't believe it is a zero budget increase. We believe it's more than that. Too much to go into this program right now. And then I did put a sign up for the last zero budget increase that they thought was a zero budget increase, but probably wasn't. I put up a sign saying if the reval was going to be good news, we'd probably know by now. Vote no again. Initial reval facts will come by December. Wait for the facts. We may know more by referendum 5. This was sent to them in a red paper way early in the process. They paid no attention to it. They waited and did it by the charter rules, and now we're in deep trouble. Sadly, the 4th budget passed last time. I'm asking you to do the same thing again this time, just like I told you last time, because we're in worse shape now than we were then. If we stopped then and fixed the problems, we'd be a year ahead of the game. So the 4th referendum, the budget did pass, unfortunately, and a lot of people think it wasn't zero. The revaluation results averaged 18%, and why is it different than the ones we had projected? But it's very close. It's not the mill rate is even more than we thought it was going to be, the markup, and that is that a lot of the sales were not market value sales that require adjustments to the sales price. For example, on the next slide, for example, non-arm's length sales, sales of convenience, government entities sales, charitable sales, religious sales, educational sales, auction, estate, financial sales, in lieu of foreclosure sales, etc. There's many, many, many more. You can get from the assessor's office some papers that'll tell you, piles of paper that'll tell you all the things that could be considered there. So it's non-market value sales that reduce for adjustments to the sales price. So let's get on with it. Let's turn this budget down. And with that, I want to play the next clip. Same clip over again. Say goodnight right now because we're going out of the program when the clip's over. And join us on Tuesday night at Planning for Success, and we'll talk more a bit about what we think needs to be done when this budget's turned down. Thank you.
You're not going to close the deficit. You cannot go out there and pay the deficit off, which is going to be 5 to 7 mils, without restructuring the services and bringing the costs down. I mean, we understand that there is going to be some increase because you can't do it all one way or all the other. I mean, it's not all we're going to levy the tax and you're going to pay it because you'll put the old town under.
Right.
I mean, there is just no more left in the real estate value there to do it. And people are questioning me on well, your reval analysis was wrong. It was dead right because many of the houses that surround me are foreclosed properties, are abandoned properties, properties that went for $40,000, but they weren't included in the reval because of the state language saying that it had to be an arm's length transaction.
And let's just explore that for a minute. The reason that the state doesn't or hasn't historically included those things is they have been seen to be exceptional. In the past, if there was a foreclosure on your street, it was an unusual occurrence. Yeah. It was a family that had gone through a tough time, perhaps illness, perhaps the end of a marriage, perhaps the loss of a job. It was not a daily occurrence. In Winsted, in the last 18 months, foreclosures have become a daily occurrence. Downtown, foreclosures are the market. You can't look at any given street downtown and say, here's a willing buyer and seller, and here is a foreclosure. They're all driven by the foreclosure prices at this point. And so the notion that we are going to, quote unquote, take part of the market, but not all of the market, doesn't make sense.
I'll give you a for instance, okay? In my neighborhood, and I'll just say my little neighborhood of Bank Street, Hill Street, Mountain, in Oak for the time being, but I look at more than that. In that area, there were 2 newer houses on Mountain Avenue, both on half-acre plus plots. One sold for $110,000, one sold for $101,000. Both of them, and those were at arm's length transactions. There were no houses that sold for more than $110,000. When you go and you look at my appraisal, my appraisal is way above that. When you look at the houses on my street, I mean, the house across the street was foreclosed for $40,000. They put an appraised price on that very high. But the sales price doesn't match it because it wasn't an arm's length transaction. So you have me now hemmed in by a bunch of foreclosed properties that are the market, and you're saying that, you know, in this, you know, the average price went down, what, 16-18%?
Right.
And, you know, you're going to come out of this winding up paying more. I mean, that's the 23% increase.
Yeah, I mean, it's right there. And the idea that anyone thinks that is a reasonable outcome, whether it be at the state level, the town level, or at the individual level of you or I, is absurd. Everyone understands that the market is the market. You can't just say, we're going to exclude all sales from people called Smith to people called James. That's absurd. But that's exactly what actually happened. We excluded all sales that were foreclosures.
Yeah.
Just an arbitrary distinction that was drawn that skewed the numbers. But anyway, we digress. No one stood up to support the budget last night. It was noticeable. We had a significant audience. I would say that the audience was probably generally favorably disposed towards the budget. But interestingly enough, no one stood up to actually support it.
Yeah, and there's good reason, because if you support it and you're Gilbert, you're not getting paid.